peace, peace. Om te dhyan yoga nugata apasyan Devatma Shakti Swagunair Nagudam Yaha Karnani Nikilani Tani Kalatma Yuktanya Adidishtat Yekaha. Practicing the yoga of meditation, the ancient seers perceived the divine reality existing everywhere, in everything, which, though ever one, was nevertheless veiled by its own modes of nature, and which had been inconceivable earlier due to the limitations of their own intellects. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saviryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishvavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. So with that prayer for peace going out and its accompaniment about meditation, we enter into a class on Jnana Yoga, that is the yoga of wisdom. One of the quickest routes to enlightenment, though it's going to take some deep undertaking by the aspirant, by the sincere aspirant, in order to learn all the divine principles and the deities that they connect to. Some people are in rather a quandary nowadays about the difference between deities and principles. So Jnana Yoga helps us understand and connect the deity to the principle. That is, there are gods and goddesses, there are celestial beings, there are a whole host of ancestors, there is a trinity. All of this exists deep back inside of us, as Christ told us, in the kingdoms of heaven within you. So science is going out, 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 but the spiritual aspirant turns that tendency around and goes inward and beholds the kingdoms of heaven, or the chambers of God's mansion, and begins to inspect them with his or her own consciousness. So that whole journey is enhanced greatly and informed deeply by the Jnana Yoga. Jnana means wisdom, or Vidya, or if you want to take it from the word Vedanta, Veda, which is where you are right now. And I welcome the live streaming audience here to us, and people around the world watching us here in our little ashram in Portland, Oregon. Because the last time you tuned in with us, you were seeing us in our ashram in Hawaii. So now these weekend classes, that's this weekend, and also next weekend will be live streamed in Portland, and the weekend after that in San Francisco will be live streaming. So everyone at all three of our SRV ashrams, San Francisco, Portland, and Hawaii, can tune in on Saturdays and Sundays. And also people in India, some of my students in India and in the East Coast who can't be here, can, through this marvel of modern technology, tune in to us and be with us as one sangha, one family, one spiritual gathering. which is what we would like to see across the whole sweep of the world, as people coming together in a sense of camaraderie and friendship, even more than that in these studies, that would dispel all ignorance, as you can see by some of the charts displayed before you today. Disappearance of ignorance. And this definitely is a chart is also very indicative of the destruction of ignorance, and we left off with that, if you remember, here in Portland about 2 months ago, when we studied Sadakya. Sadakya is the 6 paths of knowledge leading to perfection. This is all in accordance with our study of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, which we've been studying for over a year now. And before that we had studied the Vivekachudamani, and in the past we've studied the Bhagavad Gita together and other great scriptures. So it's our penchant over the years to delve deep into these scriptures of Eastern wisdom. These are the wisdom traditions, and most of us have been raised more in faith traditions. So there again, this combination of the 2 wings of the bird, devotion and wisdom, is a very powerful one. And we all know that a bird isn't going to get off the ground without 2 wings, or with only 1 wing. So we need to bring our devotion for God and gods and goddesses, however we look at that in the different religious traditions, together with these wisdom principles, because they are intrinsically connected, and they're connected back to our very essence, to our very self. As I've often said, there's no such thing as a foreign religion. You can strike that from your vocabulary. All religion is indigenous to your soul. So if one were to surmount such barriers as hypocrisy and narrowness and arrive at a more eclectic view, even better than that, beyond eclecticism, could arrive at a universal view, then one would be like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, our ideal here in this place. SRV Associations is based on Sharda, his wonderful divine consort and wife, his own august self, that is Sri Ramakrishna himself, the Paramahamsa, and also on Swami Vivekananda's work in the West. And many of us are probably more familiar with him, and as the same with India, as Vivekananda made such a big impression on everyone, East and West, when he was here for the brief 39 years. And arrived here in the West the first time, I think, in 1893 at the Parliament of Religions, put on by the Christians, and inviting a bunch of speakers from different religious traditions. And when they got a hold of Vivekananda, they got a hold of a man who was a sannyasin, that is, a wandering free soul, who, ironically enough, was very much like their Christ, but very much like a Christ that Christianity has rather forgotten, we might say. A Christ that owned nothing, a Christ that wandered free, a Christ that kept his mind only on God. Seek thee first the kingdom of heaven, all else will be added unto thee. It's not like the way that many of our Western peoples and cultures are acting. They feel like maybe I should seek the world first, and then maybe, if there's time, I can add God in later. You see? So this destruction of ignorance we're talking about has directly to do with that, keeping your mind focused. Danur grahitva Upanishadam mahastram. Upanishadam mahastram. Sharam hyupasanashita sanjayita. Ayamya tad bhavakatena chitasa. Chitasa, your intelligence. Laksham tadevaksharam somya vidhi. Vidhi, Vedanta, knowledge. See? So the idea is that you take these Upanishads and turn them into a bow, a weapon. And you take your mind and you sharpen it by thoughts on reality alone. You place the arrow of the mind in that bow. You draw full strength, you release, and you penetrate the mark, that imperishable Brahman, that eternal nature within you. Liable of libel, it's the greatest sin to call another man a sinner, is how Vivekananda put it. All beings are divine by nature. So he wasn't looking in terms of original sin, he was looking in terms of inherent perfection. A perfection, no doubt, that has been covered over, sublated, and hidden by many of the negative actions and karmas and the dropping of the curtain of nescience, as we will look at later in today's class, the allowance of the human mind for ignorance to occupy it and occupy it for such a long time and in such a overwhelming way that pretty soon, lifetime to lifetime, one can't even figure out where one has come from. One has lost their way. So picking up a great Upanishad is to find your way again in this mass of Maya, this morass of Maya, you might say, and cut channels, nadis, new nerves, subtle nerves inside of your own being, back through the forest of Maya to the heights of realization. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached, as Vivekananda used to say, which is a quote straight from the Upanishads. So when we looked at the Upanishads last time, and I will remind you, I hope all of you are still studying it, although there are several month breaks between the time I get to see you in each different city, we should remind ourselves that we're on chapter 4, and we were finishing with sloka 20 on our last visit, which had to do with, and I'll read it to you, God's form does not stand within the range of the senses. Okay, here we go. I can't even get one sentence out of my mouth before I want to start speaking an hour just on that one sentence. In other words, that's a good lesson for us. I'll try and keep it short. You cannot see, hear, taste, touch, or smell God. See, he's beyond the range of the senses, as they say. Even beyond the range of your dream senses tonight, because you also see, taste, touch, hear, and smell in a dream, don't you? So it should prove to you that you have a different kind of body than a physical body. You also have an inner body. That's a direct invitation for you to go inside and inspect your dreams, which is actually one of the methods for 2 or 3 traditions I can think of right now. Sufism, Vedanta, Yoga. They all want you to inspect your dreams, because dreams have a great significance for you. You want to eventually go beyond them, no doubt, but they are pointers, just like objects are pointers. And we know that most of the seers who have come to us and speak to us about this truth tell us that this is also a dream here. This is dream number 1, the waking state, and then dreaming tonight is dream number 2. Why is that? Because everything we're seeing here is dreamlike, isn't it? And if we haven't learned anything from our quantum physics other than that, then we'll have been put on a right footing, in the way Buddha saw it, Lord Buddha saw it, that everything here is empty. It's just a mass of swirling particles. So everything we're seeing is not the real thing. The real thing, the real object, would be a mass of particles if you had electron microscopes for eyes. So that's the dreamlike nature of the appearance of solidity, and the appearance of liquidity, water, the appearance of radiance, sunlight. It all has a deeper significance, and you fashion worlds out of those very things in your dreams tonight. You have 5 subtle elements in your dream, and you have 5 subtle senses in your dream. That's a whole other world. We call this the 3 worlds: outer world, inner world, and transcendent world. Transcendent world would be more like your deep sleep state, where you don't know anything but bliss. Your deep sleep state is formless, and so you're closer to your true essence when you're in deep sleep. That's a whole other teaching that Gaudapada, another great Advaita Vedantists, hand out to us. The idea of the 3 states of our consciousness, which go with the 3 matras of Om, A, U, and M. So lots of connections we have to make here. Once we make the connections, then we meditate on them. And didn't I just chant at the beginning, Shatagunam Vidyan Manavan Mananadapi, Nidhi Jasam Lakshagunam Anantam Infinity Nirvikalpakam, the wiping out of all time and all lokas, all space. Time, space goes away. So first you hear this truth, and you meditate on it. Don't just look up information on an iPad, you see, or in a computer. Then once you get the information, sit back and take it into the real computer, your mind, and expose it to your own intelligence. That's something that no machine can duplicate. Intelligence is the highest of all principles as far as Vedanta is concerned. Intellect and intelligence, buddhi. And Lord Buddha was named after that. So this prime intelligence that's in us has the ability to meditate upon things, outer and inner, and render them into one state, so that there's no duality anymore. so that there's no diversity, so that there's no variety, vaichitra. And therefore the I can become single, and you can know the truth. See? If I and I become single, you should know the truth. Many beautiful songs sung about that, for instance. Jatone nidaye reko adarini shamamake Jatone hridaye reko adarini shamamake. Oh, blissful mind. It means your mind should be naturally blissful. Oh, blissful mind, meditate on the Mother Kali, the Divine Mother of the universe, existing within you. You'll perceive her by opening your eye of wisdom. See? So Christ had it right on, didn't he? If thine eye be single, you shall know the truth. And Krishna, far, far earlier than Christ, also said the same thing. Jnana chakshu, you must open your eye of wisdom. Jnana chakshu, chakshu to see. And so that eye of wisdom is best utilized for inward inspection. It's called introspection. And when one can do that, then one can fathom the depths, the amazing depths of this reality. It's mind-boggling enough to look out into space, isn't it? But actually all you're seeing out in space is the 5 elements. And probably 2 of them are going to be in sparse demand, you see. In case you haven't noticed, there's not much air or water up there. So, like we have here, all 5, you see. So, the inner space, you won't need lungs for that. And that's why we practice evening out your breath, and your breath stops after a while, and you just go into a deep state and you don't breathe. And they say in deep sleep, you cut down your breathing process from 246,000 breaths a day to 120,000 at night. I mean, especially in deep sleep. You'd be laying next to someone when you're sleeping, and you'll hear their breathing stop for a couple minutes, and you wonder, oh my gosh, are they still alive? Are they still with us? See, Sri Sharada Devi, Holy Mother, had that experience with Sri Ramakrishna, and so hearing him go into samadhi at night in deep sleep, and he would go unconsciously into deep sleep, not like most people go unconsciously. They go in a fool and come out a fool. But a seer goes in a seer and comes out a seer. So when he goes into deep sleep, he doesn't breathe for such a long time, and so when she first lied next to him, they never consummated any sexual relationship or had any children, but when she first lied next to him, when she first came to Dakshineshwar temple, then she wasn't used to it, hearing him just stop breathing, and so she'd wake up the whole temple compound. My husband's dying, you must come, you see. So one has to get used to these inner states and to the disappearance of various senses. So that's what I think about when we say the form does not stand within the range of the senses. Sri Ramakrishna said, you're going to need love eyes and love ears. You're going to have to need a different kind of senses in order to perceive divine reality. Or as Vivekananda put it, God is not in the world. The world is in God. So if you're looking for God here, you're looking for God in all the wrong places. To quote a song and change the lyrics a little. Looking for God in all the wrong places. So you'll never find God here. Have we ever seen God? You see. Looking out in space, have we ever seen devil digging down into the earth? This is all metaphoric. Eventually the metaphoric becomes superstition, and our religion becomes worthless to inform us of the higher truth. So, God's not in the world is in God. You must see this as all a manifestation of the Supreme Brahman. Through vibration, if you want. Everything is vibrating grosser and grosser as it comes down to solid granite, you see. And as it goes, taken back in your meditation process, it becomes very, very subtle. Vibration becomes almost imperceptible until you get to, in the beginning was the Word is with God, and the Word was God. And then there it is, this Om here, the sound of thousands of bumblebees humming, they say, inside of you. And the hub of creation, or better said, projection. No one perceives that reality with the eye. Those who know that reality through the faculty of intuition, as seated in their heart, become immortal. Now, I'm just showing you this chart because so that we can, I'm not going to go through it all. We already went through it last time. I think we didn't get too much into the padas and the mantras. But if I just give you, for those of you who are new or who want a quick review, Sadakya is a loka, is a deep, deep land that beings who can inspect these inner heavens within them arrive at. It's a very, very high, very deep on the cosmic spectrum of cosmic principles. It's beyond the 24 cosmic principles, so it would be beyond mind and intellect and thought, and be beyond the ego structure, and then beyond the 20 principles, the 5 elements and the 5 subtle, the tanmatras, and the 5 gross elements and the 5 gross senses and the 5 subtle senses. So it's beyond the 24 cosmic principles. So it's a realm deep within, and when they arrive there, they study it, to give them an idea of these 6 points: kalas, tatvas, bhuvanas, varnas, padas, and mantras. Don't become overwhelmed by the Sanskrit too much. I'll give you a brief definition. They say kala, manifestation, is the nature of reality. Kala in its 5 main forms presides over all cosmic principles, pure, mixed, and impure. So kala is aspects of reality, different aspects. It simultaneously assists the unmanifest to transition into the manifest. So it's a principle of inner working, presided over by a certain deity like Shiva, who, or you see here, Nivritta Kala, Pratista Kala, Vidya Kala, Shanta Kala, and Shantatitya Kala. So Brahma presiding, Vishnu presiding, Shiva presiding, Maheshvara presiding, and Sadashiva presiding. So there's, as I said earlier, a deity that is assisting the manifestation of the unmanifested into a manifested state, helping to express it. It's so subtle that it would escape our minds. For instance, we would be born in a body and we think, oh, I did all this. Or we'd say, God did all this. And we'd be wrong on both counts, because God doesn't do anything. God, you have to leave that completely sacrosanct. It doesn't act, doesn't move, doesn't think. It doesn't come into form. It's indivisible reality. And then if you think you do it, then you give all credit to the ego. And the ego is a rascal, you see, taking credit for things, or taking fault for things, feeling worthless one moment, feeling prideful the next. So what is it that is transitioning, helping beings to transition from a manifested to an unmanifested state? What is it that's taking them from birth to death and death to birth, if you want to get more specific about it? I'll show you a chart on that in a minute. The idea of energy. Man does not live by bread alone. Prana, taking ancestors to the humans, and the humans back to the ancestors, in a circle that Lord Buddha called the Kala Chakra, the wheel of birth and death, or samsara, being born in ignorance again and again, without knowing the true nature of your timeless, deathless soul. So there you see a sort of an overlay of this first part of the chart, Kala. It's presided over by deities and aspects, and it helps. It's a transitional energy. This is very ancient. This is actually a tantric teaching, probably maybe even prior to the Vedanta, but back more in accordance with the ancient Vedas. Then the second point is tattva, beginning with the elements and proceeding to Shiva and Shakti. Consciousness as experience is made up of worlds, Bhuvanas, which are coming next, which are planes of existence consisting of tattvas. So what are the tattvas? pretty easy. It's not too hard to memorize them. Earth, air, fire, water, ether. Odor, flavor, visibility, tangibility, audibility. Excreting, procreating, locomotion, handling, speaking, smelling, tasting, seeing, feeling, and hearing. That's your physical body, basically. That's the physical tattvas. Each of those things is a principle. You can't just sort of mass them together without specifying them, nor can you leave them unconnected. So you have to see that the eyes are a principle. There's a power in the eyes to see. The fleshy orb is nothing. It's the power in the eye to see that's going to be more deity-like. You see, it has more light in it, more ability to shine. So that's tattvas. Now, there's tattvas. The psychical tattvas are mind, thought, intelligence, ego, soul. They call that Purusha in the old days. Cosmic laws, of which Sadakya is one of them. Phases of time, time itself, higher knowledge, subtle matter, and attraction, the power of attraction. These are main tattvas or aspects in your mind, in the mind of God. In the collective mind, in the individual mind, and in the cosmic mind. That's a three-level mind we're talking about here. And that's the kingdom of heaven back inside of you, really, is this threefold mind. And again, another triputi, or another triple teaching that goes with the three bodies, the three matras of the word Om, the waking, dreaming, and deep sleep state. All of these are triple teachings that you can just lay them out and connect them one to another. They all pretty much connect to the three worlds they call Triloka, outer, inner, and transcendent. Now there's another set of tattvas that are spiritual. Inner guidance, Sadakya. So anyone coming to this path of Sadakya would begin to study aspects, categories, regions, like lokas, letters, words, and utterances. Remember the Seattle retreat we just had that some of you were at? And didn't we pretty much look pretty deeply into regions, lokas? We were talking about subtle nerve endings that go inward and carry hundreds and thousands of souls from the body to a different realm, and then carry it back to the body and the fetus and so forth, in and out along these subtle nerve channels. And when they go in and out of these subtle nerve channels, they have to pass through different lokas, different realms. And those realms are vibrating grosser to subtler to a causal level, to very subtle, there's no word for it, just causal is the best word. Extremely subtle. They have words for it in Sanskrit, ati sukshma and so forth. Anaranian, they have words for it that if you know the Sanskrit some, then you can get a whole different impression of the word causal than you would by just saying causal. Just like if you say psyche or something, it's a word you borrow, but if you get a whole different meaning of it if you said samskara. The samskaras, these impressions in the mind that cause people to act the way they do and think the way they do and so forth. That is a whole art of samskara, and it stretches back lifetimes. So these beings are far beyond thinking in terms of, is there another lifetime or isn't there another lifetime? They're already experiencing all their lifetimes and looking back and meditating upon them. They're far beyond the idea of does God exist or does God not exist. God is existence. That was one of the first and earliest statements in the Vedas. God is existence. It's not a matter of whether it exists or not. If it doesn't exist, you don't exist. But are you going to say you don't exist? Everyone says I am. Nobody wants to walk around saying I'm not, I'm not. So existence affirms existence. That's all. You don't have to get into a theological argument about it, so forth. It's just obvious. So they don't waste their time with that kind of verbiage. They just have words specific to the process of realization. So spiritual tattvas, I had to stop at Sadakya since that was pretty much what we are looking at here. Letters and words, that is alphabets and so forth, are very important to to the Indian Rishi. And mantras, of course, probably of all 6 of these, this one most of the Westerners have heard of. The other 5, they'd say, oh, I don't know about that. But mantra, everyone's heard of it, about mantra. There's this deep utterances that go with your deity. So, again, to finish this out, tattvas, spiritual wisdom, non-duality, primal sound, that's nada, that's like nadis, right? And supreme deities, or the supreme deity itself, Ishvara. So you see a threefold world of tattvas existing, inner, outer, inner, and transcendent. Perfectly laid out by these great seers of truth. Bhuvana, quickly, 224 realms lie within 14 universes, 7 higher and 7 lower, ranging from gross to subtle to causal. We've just been talking about that. So if you want to put it into the 7, there they are. Brahmaloka, Tapaloka, Janaloka, Maharloka, Svarloka, Bhuvarloka, and Burloka. Bur, Bhuva, Swaha, right? It's the famous first 3 words of the Gayatri. Has to be, please protect those first 3 worlds. Because basically these other worlds don't need protection if you don't have a physical body there, or a physical world. But here, Bur, Bhuva, Swaha is these first 3 lokas, or realms. You could call them, you could equate them roughly to the physical world, lower heaven, and higher heaven. Lower heaven would have ancestors and siddhas and beings like that, and munis, and then the higher heavens would have the Indra and the gods and so forth. They also, like the Sapta Rishis, 7 rishis and so forth. They also sing about that. Sapta Rishi Mandalike Jnana Yogi Rishi Var. Sapta Rishi Mandalike Jnana Yogi Rishi Var. Brahma Sukha Chodakara Swayam Hi Aite. Brahma Sukha Chodakara Swayam Hi Aite. Shri Rama Krishna Ekadin. So it sings about the Sapta Rishis. Mandalike Jnana Yoga Rishivar. So the Jnana Yoga, Sri Ramakrishna, this great Jnana Yogi, he knows the whole mandala of beings. So this is kind of like, you could put it in terms of mandalas, or circles. There's not just a circle of Maya, a circle of samsara, there's also a circle of enlightened souls, enlightened worlds. Everything is cyclic in form, no doubt. When a person becomes perfectly enlightened, then they don't see the worlds anymore. The mandalas all fade away, and they're just like a hailstone that fell in an ocean. They've just become one indivisible, timeless, deathless, birthless, and blissful reality. Emerge in it. We all have a memory of that back inside of us. We were talking about that at the retreat. Smriti Bedu, this causal memory of being one with Brahman. Thrilled with bliss, saturated through and through with the feeling of wholeness, perfection. So, good to meditate on that. Call it back forth into your physical life, into your daily life. And, in other words, the opposite of brooding. Let's give up brooding and let's start meditating. So, yes, had to think about Sapta Rishis when we looked at that. 7 realms. The Sapta Rishis are 1 rishi for each realm, 1 very high soul. Sri Ramakrishna said Swami Vivekananda was the Sapta Rishi of the Brahmaloka. Now, Varnas is garland of letters, the science of 51 alphabets which are an expression of the Vak Devi, the goddess of the word. So they trace all of this intelligence back to a supreme deity called the Divine Mother of the Universe, which I just sang about, Kali. in ancient times called Saraswati, the goddess of wisdom. The mystery of creation, Shrishti Rahasya, vibrates via particles of intelligence, chitmatras, and includes three main elements: alphabets, words, and meaning. Matrakas, Shabda, and Artha. Devoid of Matraka Shakti, consciousness cannot reveal itself. Worlds, beings, objects, even God, all that is the personal God, all evolve from Matraka, from words. In the beginning was the word, right? So now we're beginning to understand how important sound, vibration, and words and meanings are. See? Consciousness cannot reveal itself. It will remain veiled or clouded unless you're able to express yourself through words. And those words are subtle vibrations in your mind, in the mind of God first. You meditate on what God's mind holds. You see, then you'll have this idea of how full and complete the manifestation is, and how everything breaks into form through the power of vibration. And science is rather on the trail of that, but they're going out into the realm of vibrating particles, which is the emptiness inside of objects. Buddhism calls it shunyata, emptiness. So going inward, you come more and more closer to this primal vibration. When Sri Ramakrishna said, when I first encountered Om, the primal vibration, I saw all worlds coming out of it, playing for a while, and then all dissolving back into it. And it was doing this all the time. It wasn't like something evolved over 4 billion years. It was like it was spontaneously projected, and it was sustained, and then it was withdrawn, all inside one eternal moment. So that's what we call timelessness, and that's what you feel in deep sleep, when you have no body, no ego, no children, no cell phone. None of that exists in deep sleep, and you're perfectly happy there. And when they wake you up, you're cranky. You say, why did you wake me up out of that beautiful state? Now I have to come back here. See? So samadhi or nirvana or satori or those great experiences are rather like that. They're higher than deep sleep. Deep sleep is called the third world. But turiya is beyond the third world, beyond the world of deep sleep, and it's superconscious experience. In deep sleep, the curtain of nescience, as we discussed at the saddle retreat, has come down hard. You see, and you'll go into it. You'll see everything there. What they're calling here subtle matter. And did you remember that we just mentioned that? Subtle matter is one of those spiritual tattvas, isn't it? Oh no, it's one of the cyclical tattvas, right there, subtle matter. So in that way, everything exists in potential back inside of you, and then it gets projected out, and then it gets withdrawn again. And that's basically what you're doing every time you go from waking to dreaming to deep sleep. It's also what you do when you take an in-breath, and when you hold your breath, and when you expel your breath. That's a microcosm view of expansion, sustenance, and contraction, isn't it? So everything is built on this triple movement, these cycles that go in and out. And if you have the eye of a yogi, if your third eye has been opened, as we just said, then you're going to connect those and meditate upon them. So you're going to know what they mean. So that, back to this great principle of Varna, is to know what words and vibrations and things mean is a very profound way of sadhakya. It's one of those 6 ways in which you can make sense, more than sense. You can skirt divine reality and its realization through these methods. Now, the last 2 are pada and mantra. Pada is the construction and meaning of whole words springing from matrakas. An arrangement of these words into statements and profound utterances is constitutive of mantras. So we take the best of all of these matrakas and we put them into a very condensed statement. Like may we always and ever meditate on the radiant effulgence of the Supreme Being. So it kind of cuts the chase, doesn't it? And so there are these that's in English. Of course, if I were to say something like that in Sanskrit, then it would be much more fashioned towards the art of concentration, see, condensation and concentration. That is, you can compact it all down into a very potent power for awakening. It's sort of like if you exploded the atom, then you'd get this huge destructive power. But if you split one of these atoms of intelligence that they're talking about here, then you'd get a huge implosion. See, and you could use that for realization. So, atomic particle going out, atmic particle going in. Intelligent particle. So that's what they're talking about here when they talk about particles of intelligence. And the particles of intelligence are called Shrishti Rahasya. Rahasya means secret, Shrishti means creation. So the Tantrists say that a whole secret of creation, it has to do with particles and their vibration. That's how they looked at things. Now the final is mantra. The science of cosmic sound, mantra is direct knowledge. Divine spontaneous action proceeds from it. Tattvas form the objective side of experience, while mantra forms the subjective side. By practicing these two aspects, one attains spiritual ascendancy. Mantra then is special knowledge which, when contemplated, reveals the otherwise unseen truth that the universe is full of Brahman. Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Resha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagadcha. It is the apt and final conclusion of Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings in the world, all this is Brahman. So why aren't we seeing it as that? We're seeing it as a world that is separate from other worlds. And the beings on it are separate from each other. And those beings as an individual and collective consciousness are separate from God. So there's divisions put everywhere we look. People are living in houses with walls. So this tendency to divide and separate is there running rampant in our minds. And so you came to Sri Ramakrishna and he couldn't close a door, he couldn't button a shirt. See? There was no closure in him. People speak about closure as being a good thing. I'm talking about opening being the best thing. Being ever open. Splitting it wide open. Not just an atom, but the atom of your own intelligence to get this, to milk this essence out of it. Somya Vidti, we just chanted. Get the essence out of it. So, I didn't mean to spend that much time on Sadakya, but this is just an idea of one of the nadis, or one of the lokas, and the nadis that are leading to it, that is a part of your inner world. And the mind has the ticket of admittance to that. Its intelligence, its concentration, its focus, its abilities can enter into this and begin studying. And in fact, when you're sitting here, you've entered the realm of Sadakya pretty much. And at least 3 or 4 of these you're talking about directly as we present them. Well, anyway, this is in accord with that last sloka we took up last time I was here. That is 4:18 of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. To go on and finish that, there is only that auspicious one who is imperishable, who is worthy of being adored, even by the Creator. From him has proceeded the ancient wisdom, that is, the Sadakya. This is a very high cosmic principle in the scope of the 12 higher tatvas of Shaivism. The 24 started out in India. They looked at it and said, that's great, perfect. Let's add 12 more because you have to explain phases of time, you have to explain space and its disappearance, you have to explain the personal God. There are lots of things. You have to explain higher wisdom, you have to explain the power of attraction. Those weren't covered in the lower principles, you see. So Shaivism schools of Shaivism, that is worship of Lord Shiva, whom we'll see here in a minute, added to it a list of 12 higher principles. They're called spandas in that tradition. Spanda means a vibrational sphere. So they're telling you pretty much with the word in Sanskrit, guess what? There are vibrating spheres within you. The kingdoms of heaven are within you. And they want you to open up to them. And through the power of Kala, express them. Use the power of Kala. It is these aspects to actually express the inexpressible, or manifest the unmanifested. Because there are deities in there that will help you do this. I mean, you could say, if you want to be spiritually egotistic, say, these are my deities. They all belong to me. They're all inside of me. From the lowest to the highest. All of these are within inside of me. They're inside my Atman. See, there was right there at the heart. They're in my heart. And that's actually about the next sloka. Let's go on. 19. No one can grasp that imperishable being above or across or in the middle. There is none equal to him whose name is great glory. His name is great glory. So, look here at the lokas and nadis and transmigration of souls chart, which is more than an eyeful. You have to probably spend a few hours just poring over it with your own copy, which at the break, for instance, the live streaming audience will be able to see these for some 10 or 15 minutes. But if we look at something like this in accord with that statement, whose name is great glory, basically that's what we want to present to a Western culture that is rather dulled by secular pursuits alone, and by rounds of conventional religion, rounds of conventional business, rounds of conventional life, and conventional psychology and conventional science. The only thing anyone's getting any thrill out of anymore is quantum physics, if you want to ponder anything higher. Actually, it should be our psychology, because yoga is the psychology of India. So right now, the gods of psychology here are probably Jung and Freud, right? And the philosophers here are Roman and Grecian. Basically, that's where West has borrowed everything from. And there were a few lights among them, no doubt, but they didn't go this deep. Nowhere did they go this deep. Jung and Freud never had Oriental people on their therapy table. They were in Europe, you see. If they had had a Hindu man on the therapy table and they started talking about instinct and heredity, the man would have sat up and said, "What do you mean? All of this comes from my past lifetime, not from my upbringing. A few things came from my upbringing, and instinct is nature, is in the nature of animals and insects. Instinct is there, but if you're talking about what really makes me who I am, that's my samskaras. And my samskaras are in accord with my past lifetimes, what I developed along this long chain of existences I've lived. Because I'm an eternal being, Mr. Jung. I've always existed, and so have you. We've both lived many, many lifetimes, but I'm aware of mine and you're not. See? So coming aware of your past lifetimes, as I said earlier, is taken for granted by the ancient Indian rishis. It's something that the yogi will come upon in the course of natural meditation over time. They'll have no doubt that everything that they are now, that they have on the table right now, that they've placed the cards on the table, is due to their past existences. The way they look even, the way they act, the way they talk, or lack thereof, see, is due to their past existences. The features on their face, looking in a mirror, you can see back in your lifetimes. They say if you look back out into space, you can look back in time, right, to the Big Bang. The same if you look in your own eyes, in your own face, you're looking back in time to your previous existences. So let nature and universe go spinning on in their insentient way forever. But you must find the unchangeable, you must find the immutable, you must find the eternal, you must find the stationary, you must find the stable, you must find the witness upon which all this phenomena has been birthed and plays. Just like waking, dreaming, deep sleep, back to waking. See? There's one eternal witness out of which all of this has sprung. And that's the purpose of human life, is to find that. If you can find it here in this body, then you become a Jivan Mukta, or the Buddhists call it a Bodhisattva, like Dalai Lama. Then you'll become a person who has awakened fully to the eternal moment. No more living in the past for me. No more projecting into the future. No more living in the present day by day even. There's just one eternal moment, I'm in it, and I'm it. It's like the cosmic game of tag. You're it. When consciousness taps you on the shoulder and says, I select you for enlightenment, and that's your moment. That's the end of all lifetimes. That's the end of all. It's the end of all this. It's the end of wisdom, too. You emerge in the truth. You don't seek anymore. You found that all knowledge lies within you, or all kingdoms of heaven are within you. All you have to do is connect with it. And the barriers begin to fall down. The curtain of nescience, cloud of unknowing thins. The curtain of nescience rises. And there you are, face to face with your own light. You must believe this. Not just believe it, you must have faith in it. And not just have faith in it, you must realize it. That's all about the Atman, which we've looked at before. Let's see. We come back to this in a minute because it's an eyeful, as I said. But we looked at this at the retreat, remember? Always good to remind ourselves what our true nature is like. Quickly, it is unborn, it is stable, that is, it doesn't move. It doesn't have to move because it's always everywhere. They're like a spider in its web. You see, it knows everything that's happening everywhere in its world. It's absolute. I'm talking about you now, your true self. I'm describing you. It's ancient, or maybe better, timeless. It's immovable. It's eternal. It's inactive. It's immutable, which means changeless. Everything else is changing around you. You're staying in the middle, changeless. Whereas Vivekananda said, the soul picks up a book of nature and reads it, and then puts it back down after drinking knowledge. It never went anywhere. The book of nature, he just turned it page by page and said, oh, I remember all the knowledge that's within me. And he put it down, and in the whole process, he never moved an inch. So that's how Vivekananda describes Purusha, the soul, and Prakriti, nature. Their relationship is like that. One has come out of the other. So if you begin to think you are nature, you are an object, or you're attached to an object, or you're bound by objects, or you're just a material girl living in a material world, then you've fallen far from the truth. Far, far, far from the truth. So, on the opposite side of the spectrum is this. You are immutable, changeless. You are unmanifested, supremely unmanifested. You are inexhaustible. You are avinashi, indestructible. You are sarvagataha, all-pervading. You are achintyaha, incomprehensible. They say about Divine Mother of the Universe, she doesn't even know the extent of her own wisdom. So vast it is. Even the mother doesn't know how vast her own wisdom is. Now that's like you. You don't know what's back there. We're not talking about, again, sitting on the therapy table and dredging up a bunch of unholy things. We're talking about accessing all this beatific vision inside of us. Resist not evil. Just let that go, you see, and then concentrate on all the light within you, all the power within you. This is the 13 inherent characteristics of the Atman. When they say inherent characteristics, they mean it's more like it's not like taking a tree and putting ornaments on it, right? So the Atman is the tree, and then all of these things are ornaments on it? No. This is the green of the tree. See? It's one with the tree. It's what the tree consists of. It's the inherent nature of the tree. So the inherent nature of your inner self is this. And if you had have learned this, let's see, 2,000 years ago, when Christ first taught it, then you would have not gotten yourself in the predicament we see today in American culture, which is godless. See? Even the God it does believe in is some series of errors, philosophically speaking. That there's somehow original sin, or that somehow there's eternal damnation. What nonsense has come up, you see, from the meddling of religion by inferior minds. And go to the great rishis, to the great seers, and they will clarify you right away, and you will be free. Know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. It's an ancient truth written in stone, in the stone of philosophy, you might say. So a quick look back at these inherent characteristics. And Vivekananda says here, it is not in the brain but in the heart that the Atman, possessed of knowledge, power, and activity, has its seat. The chief nerve center near the heart, called the sympathetic ganglia, is where the Atman has its citadel. This is modern cryptic language, isn't it? I mean, because if you read the Upanishads, then what you have is, wait for me to call it up here and I'll read it to you. Listen to this knowledge about the heart and the Atman. In the heart dwells the Atman. There are 101 nerves centered there, and in each one of those 100 more, and in each of these branch into 72,000 others called nadis. In all of these, Shakti power flows. Are they being unspecific there? Are they being too general for you? When put together with Vivekananda's statement 1 century ago, isn't it pretty clear to you that there's a citadel, a whole inner castle with chambers, there's a whole kingdoms of heaven within you, and it's connected by hundreds and thousands of nerves, just like in your body, only nerves in a cosmic body. If your nerves tied together in one body can reach to New York and back, I don't know if they've tried that yet. They can use their body, not mine, for that. But if it connects that way, then how long, how deep would these other nerves go? Hundreds times 100 times 72,000 nerves, a network of nerves that would be impossible to even illustrate if I had a huge hologram right here and I started showing you the nature of the cosmic form that you belong to. All the different nadis going different ways, different locus in different worlds, some lower, some higher. All in accordance with those 7 worlds. See? Isn't it 7 worlds? Let's see if I can read this right. Muladhara, Svanisthana, Manipura. Oops, I'm not reading it right. See what I mean? 7 chakras, 7 worlds. Lower at the base of the spine, then at the genitals, then at the gut, and then at the heart, then at the throat, then at the third eye, then at the crown. Is this inner citadel, you see. Many layers, many gradated levels of consciousness. And consciousness is the backdrop of it all. A consciousness that never takes form, even though form appears on it. Just sort of like looking on a quiet lake and you see a whole city reflected in a lake. Shankara used that. He said, looking in a mirror, I saw the city behind me, you see. He was walking away from the city and he had a mirror, and then he was looking at himself, and then he said, all of a sudden he saw the city he just left behind him, see. So it's just, this citadel is just like imprinted on the ocean of consciousness. How about this one? Within the recess of the heart is the akasha of consciousness. Akasha means a very subtle space. with its many openings shaped like a calyx of a lotus in which all the universes exist. And this one, the individual soul is as subtle as a hairpoint divided and subdivided hundreds of times. In all of these, you're finding this idea of nadis, subtle nerves, running, channels, see, along which energy courses. And that energy is carrying consciousness. It's carrying consciousness that right now is attached to form of different kinds. But when it lets go of its attachment to form, it becomes this. See? It becomes what it truly is. Immovable, ancient, timeless, imperishable, inexhaustible, indestructible. But as long as it's coursing through these nadis, it's taking form. You see here, right here at this, right between the third eye and the crown, you see, is the taking of form. Consciousness, which was an ocean of indeterminable ocean of bliss, homogeneous mass of bliss, chitgana, all of a sudden wants to take form. So goes down through out the third eye, the visionary, into the realm of sadakya, you see, in the throat, the expression of wisdom and so forth, and then trickles down further into the heart. Finally, if it's wise, it will not go any lower. Like Sri Ramakrishna said, when I came down, you see here's, where is it, Avatar, see? Avatar is right there, in that triangle pointing down, right? That one who descends. So Avatar is descending down into these worlds. So he said, I came down into the worlds of name and form as far as the heart, because there is God's drawing room. And there I can talk to the devotees, talk and sport with the devotees. God's drawing room. Does that sound like a chamber in God's mansion to you? Even the Avatar of 1800 said so. But he said, I couldn't go any lower. Okay. In fact, beings came to him from lower. That's what that means. The beings came to him from lower. He would stay there, posited there, and then beings would come to him and give him their karma. So he died of cancer of the throat. Girish Ghosh says, if I had known what a huge pit of dispensing of karma that Ramakrishna was, I would have committed many more sins. He said jokingly. So it was Ramakrishna, the Avatar, is just this wide open, the receptacle for neutralization of transgressions. So beings would come to him, see, and try to ascend through this Granthi here, this Vishnu Granthi. So right between the where the fetus develops and where food is digested, to where a man hears Om, begins to hear the sound and see the light, and love God first and foremost, with his whole heart, his whole mind, and his whole soul. Right? So that's a very hard place to get beyond. Most people will stay in the realm of the ancestors, and their ideal is what? Going to heaven. See, more nonsense from fundamentalist religion. Heaven is a very low place to the Vedantist. My teacher right here in Portland, Swami Sheshananda, taught here for 40 or 50 years before he passed, used to say that. He said, I don't care for a post-mortem emancipation. I'm not interested in heaven. I'll take my liberation right now, thank you. Because liberation and freedom is now, in the eternal moment. Not waiting for some future date or to go to some loka somewhere. He is all lokas. All lokas are awake in him. See? And he can go anywhere he wants, at any time. I mean, modern examples of that would be Dalai Lama, who took 14 conscious births in the body in Tibet. That shows a great amount of freedom, right? To be able to consciously incarnate in bodies with families that would allow him to continue his work. How about this one? Bathe at the most sacred confluence of holy rivers found within the precious human body, where lies the three spiritual nerve channels, Sushumna, Ida, and Pingala. See? Or sometimes I call it the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. See? Go sailing. See? Go sailing even beyond where Christopher Columbus went. You see, go sailing in these three primal nerve centers in the human body, precious human body. These are rivers. What do rivers sound like? Nadis. Yeah. If you look upon out here, isn't everything flowing? Even so much, even the gross flow of traffic along a freeway is just a nadi of energy, isn't it? Well, those same nadis, whether they're rivers or tributaries, or winds, trade winds, or whatever, in the gross body, there's also those kinds of channels in the subtle body. And that's what takes beings from birth to death and death to birth. There's no question in India where souls go, where they come from. That's old news. There's no doubt or questioning about that. Of course, they're going in through these subtle nerve endings. It's a whole inner world, kingdoms of heaven within you. That's what Christ was trying to tell the fishermen. So, some of these beautiful quotes then. Here's another one. There in the heart, where all the subtle nerve endings meet, like the spokes of a chariot wheel at the hub, abides the Atman. The Atman, stationary but becoming manifold. Meditate on that self as Om, the word, and Godspeed to you in crossing over to the farthest shore beyond all darkness. This is just a few of the beautiful quotes that you get out of the Upanishads and the Tantras when you go looking for some description of these three worlds, the gross, the subtle, and the causal, and that consciousness which stands behind them. You have to take them all as one reality. You only separate them, as you do in any good scientific laboratory. You only separate them for use in individual study of each, like this. So I know what the physical consists of, what the mind consists of, and what the spirit consists of, and I want to know those. But then I'm going to have to, see the backdrop that's holding all wisdom is that one indivisible consciousness called Atman, or Purusha, or Chaitanya. And then I'll be better informed. So all of that coming out of this Sloka 19. No one can grasp him. He is above or across or in the middle. None is equal to him whose name is great glory. His form does not stand within the range of the senses. No one perceives him with the eye. Those who know him through the faculty of intuition as seated in their heart become immortal. Whose name is great glory, and then we'll take a break. Here's another chart which we sometimes pull out to show this great glory of the Atman. Sometimes you could correlate that to Ishvara, because there's God with form and there's God without form. Brahman is God without form, but then inside of, like I say, taking form happens about right there. So you're going to see Ishvara appear, avatar. And all of a sudden the personal God, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Moses, Muhammad, the personal God will appear for a manifestation of it on earth. Due to being totally master of the aspects, right? Kala. They know how to manifest themselves. So they're using that power of manifestation. So they will produce a body for you, for those who are seeking, and then they will appear before you as a great teacher, as an avatar, as a saint or a seer or a rishi. And then they will begin to inform you of your true nature in case you've forgotten. So here's a beautiful picture of Sri Ramakrishna in the highest samadhi. Walt Disney Studios took this picture for us and removed all the imperfections in the old photography, 1800s photography. And if you see a original print of it now, thanks to Swami Chaitananda, St. Louis Center, has produced a lot of beautiful pictures for the Vedanta Society and for the world of seeing what an avatar really looks like face to face. You see all the imperfections in the photograph cleared up, and you can just see this man is walking bliss. His eyes are just pools of bliss. And he's in a very, very high state of nirvikalpa samadhi. So, good to use that samadhi picture of Ramakrishna to designate the 6 treasures in the 6 divine powers of God. Let's go through them quick, and then we'll take a break. First, the quote by Vedavyas, the father of Vedanta. He says, "As the web comes out of the spider, as sparks come out from fire, so this whole universe proceeds from the beloved goddess, the primal force of existence. We salute her, the Mahashakti, within whose Mayic power this whole universe, moving and unmoving, is projected, sustained, and withdrawn." That is the father of Vedanta talking about the divine mother of the universe. Probably selected from the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, because Vedavyas came back so many times, incarnated, to recall the scriptures for us, so that they wouldn't become extinct or lost. Well, there's the 6 treasures right there. Shri, Bala, Aishvarya, Vigyan, Tyaga, and Tejas. That is unlimited abundance, Shri. Sometimes it's also a name for Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, Shri, Shri Padma. Bala, magnificent glory. If you don't know a little bit about that by now, then I've failed in conveying even just a portion of what that glory is like. Aishvarya, irresistible strength. Vijnana, penetrating wisdom. Tyaga, natural renunciation, where no attachment even occurs. That is, a soul like that wouldn't have to practice detachment, vairagyam, because attachment wouldn't have occurred in the first place. Just natural renunciation, like that was Christ's crown of thorn. But Ramakrishna's crown is the crown of renunciation. Tejas, awesome splendor. Tejas means light, leaping out of the nerves, leaping out of the body, even like an aura, or like a halo. Those kinds of things are indicative of that inner spiritual light called Tejas. It came from Ojas, which was taking this wisdom and practicing it, rolling it around in your head and doing some practice, and that light of wisdom turns into Tejas, the power to transmit it to others. Now the 6 divine powers of God. I like these a lot because they put our mind in a different space than, say, people who are all obsessed with the Astabala Siddhis. Oh, let's levitate, or let's walk on water, or let's learn how to dominate over others. Those are called the 8 occult powers. But the great seers say those are crow droppings by the side of the road. You don't want those. Don't go anywhere near them. Here's what you want. You want to be Jivatman. That's the power of God. So you are a power of God, is what they're saying. The Jiva, the embodied soul, is actually a manifestation of God. See, that's all of a sudden changes our thinking about things. I'm not a sinner anymore. I'm not worthless. I'm not just a little tiny fragment inside a huge, vast universe. I'm a power, an eternal power of God. Jivatman. His quote there, the jiva at first remains in a state of ignorance. He is not conscious of God, but of multiplicity. Then he becomes conscious that God dwells in all beings. And of course that will happen after he realizes God in him or herself, that Atman we were talking about, dwelling in the citadel of the heart. He'll realize that and awaken. Until then, the consciousness is about varieties, about multiplicity, about diversity, and by contemplating that, pretty soon the mind gets fragmented. They have it. One of the powers of Maya, of delusion, is called Shatavadana, thinking about 1,000 things at once. Does that sound like some of your people you meet out there? Their mind is thinking about 1,000 things at once. So it's very difficult for them to concentrate, especially on reality. So that becomes habitual, and then people are born. They die in that state, and they're born in that state. You see? And they will never wake up until they, through the grace of God, meet an illumined soul and begin to take these teachings and arrive at enlightenment. Here's another divine power of God, Jagat, the universe, as I just chanted. Vedanta Siddhanta Niruktiresha Ramaiva Jivaha Sakala Jagad Cha. So Jagat is the universe. That's full of Brahman too. But when you say all this is Brahman, don't make the mistake then philosophically of saying Brahman can be an object. That's not what they mean. Brahman is the underlying substratum for all these objects. Buildings, houses, cities, planets. The underlying substratum. That's what we mean by all is Brahman. That is, if you take this all away, Brahman will still exist. But if you could somehow take Brahman away, all of this would disappear. That's what underlying substratum means. So you're going to have to see through the appearance of some things. And if you study a little quantum physics and make the right conclusion that all of this is empty, vibrating at a billionth of a second, subatomic particles, then it probably should be pretty easy for you to renounce it, right? Because how is it empty? It's empty of substance. How else? It's empty of the ability to fulfill you. Nobody has ever gotten fulfilled by the world, especially not the rich and the famous. They're most often the ones with the gun to their head. Bored. So objects can bore you, objects can get stolen, objects can get destroyed, objects can decay. Need I go on? Objects can give you pleasure, therefore attach you, make you obsessed, and bind you. So either side you look at the object, it's a lose-lose situation. So the final conclusion is to renounce them. And then just move amongst them without any attachment whatsoever. There's no problem in you using them or associating with them, just never identify with them. Always know that you are sentient, Atman, and that is insentient nature. Make a divorce from nature. And that's what Buddha finally did under the bo tree. He said, "O architect of the universe, I have seen you. Now I will not build any more homes here. Not homes of wood, not homes of flesh and bone, not homes of wise conception. I renounce all. I'm off the wheel of time. I'm out of the locus of space, of inner space, even the inner kashas. I'm a Buddha, I'm free." The greatest spiritual being that ever came to earth, most likely, Lord Buddha. Incredibly great. And influenced so many great thinkers after him, like Patanjali, the father of yoga, and so forth. So this divorce from nature, you see, is very important in order for you to realize your formless essence. So what I'm saying here is that, you can dissolve completely in your formless essence, or you can choose to remain in form, but without any attachment to those illusory things that you see around you. And even more so, isn't it going to be that all these objects are going to be full of wisdom for you? The chair, the pillow, the TV set, the iPad. Didn't I fill my iPad with wisdom? Am I talking secular stuff or conventional nonsense ever since I sat down here? So you can use all these objects as a yogi, as a yogini, for the good of all human beings. Just have a little discrimination and be very careful not to identify. So this is what it's like to know that Brahman exists behind the universe of name and form. In fact, here's a very good statement apropos to what I was just saying by Sri Ramakrishna Paramhamsa. He says, "This universe is God's glory. People see his glory and forget everything else." They do not seek God. This universe has evolved from the Supreme Brahman. So, Maya's enchantment, you see, the sleight of hand has got you looking at distracting all sorts of different things that you have not seen the original yet. It's Sri Ramakrishna said, if you go to Calcutta, there are 4 great gardens, and you only have one day in Calcutta, and you want to see the best garden. That's all the time you have for. So if you run around trying to find these gardens and visit them, you'll waste too much time. So you have to go to the owner of the garden and ask him, which is your best garden? So he's saying, go to Lord, go to God, go straight to God, and He will be able to tell you exactly what this universe consists of. You'll get beyond the enchantment of outer glory, and you'll realize the Lord who is the very essence of supreme glory. That is what we just said up here. Bala, magnificent glory. Now, manas, mind, is another power of God. This shouldn't be so hard to understand, should it? As marvelous as the mind is. But, like I say, this whole list is putting us on a whole new trajectory. When I first saw this, I thought, no, that's what I really wanted to hear under the heading of power. See, I'm tired of dominating power and occult power and power this, power that, power over others. Let's find out what true power is, Shakti. Let's find out what that is, so we can know what to worship, what's worthy of worship, what's worthy of our attention. So when I saw this, it was a total revelation to me. Gee, the universe is one of God's power. I'm one of God's power. The mind is one of God's powers. These are His precious things, you see. These are closest to this sentient. They have much more to do with consciousness and much less to do with nature. He says, regardless of the path one follows, yoga is not possible until the mind is stilled. The mind of a yogi is under his control. He is not under the control of his mind. So, of course, if we say mind is one of God's glories, we're going to have to make that qualification to it. The controlled mind is one of God's glories. Now, buddhi or intelligence, I mentioned that earlier. A man's intelligence is very delicate and can get covered, distorted, or misled. He must therefore practice many austerities so as to acquire divine knowledge. So you sit with your teacher for endless years, like I did with Swami Sheshananda in Portland, and with Swami Nityaswarupananda in India, and others. You sit at their feet, you learn, you absorb, you read, you study, and you never give it up. And one day I awoke and my ignorance was
Gone.
Utterly gone, yes. So the disappearance of ignorance is what I had up here at the beginning, and we'll take that in the second half, how ignorance disappears. It's not like something you can go after and say, there it is, and point a laser at it and destroy it. It's non-existent, but it seems to exist. It's like a cloud of nescience or unknowing that's unseen in you, and it's causing you much suffering. So rather than watering the weeds, you water the flowers. You go after these great teachings, and you just let this brooding about, I'll never wake up, I'll never destroy my ignorance, I'll never destroy my doubt, I'll never get rid of my fears. Just leave that alone, and just do what will destroy the fears, doubts, and ignorance. That's just the straight-on path. Now, prema, love, is one of God's glories, one of His powers. He says, what is prema? The one who feels it, this intense and ecstatic love for God, not only forgets the world, but also forgets even the body, which is usually so dear to everyone. So, prema, you'd even forget your physical body. You'd forget it in love of God, you'd forget it in study of wisdom, you'd forget it in service of others. My body doesn't matter, I just serve you. So it becomes less and less of a focusing point, and this love, this ecstatic love, takes it all over. Last, jnanam, knowledge, is one of God's powers. He says, intelligence, devotion, compassion, renunciation, these belong to the realm of true knowledge. With these, a man comes near God. One more step, and he attains God. So you can say, well, I'm taking these teachings now, I'm a step away from enlightenment. I'm always a step away from enlightenment, as long as I keep entertaining wisdom like this, because these are God's powers, God's glory on earth. So with that, let's end here, and while we're away for 15 minutes, the live streaming audience will be able to see these on their screen. We'll be able to walk in front of the camera or not?
Yes.
Yes, okay, you can move about freely. So let's end here and then take a quick announcement. Namaste. We are back, and we are live, and we are more than live. We're eternally living. We are candidates for eternal life whenever we take on the teachings of great beings like Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, and so many of the teachings that we've been taking today through Sri Ramakrishna. It's called the Kali Avatar. 4 or 5 million people, can't be wrong, as they say, are worshipping the Paramahamsa today for being an eternally enlightened being, and also avatar of the Kali Yuga. Now, Kali means darkness. So, as I've often said, if you have a Kali Yuga, if you're living in an age of darkness, which means not literacy or illiteracy, but actually spiritual literacy or spiritual illiteracy. If you know that your nature is pure and perfect and you're pursuing realization of it, then that, of course, is an awakened soul. So you have nothing really to fear in that regard. But if you're one of those that is still going around the rounds of birth and death, or any kind of cycle, conventional cycle, 9 to 5, or work and then vacation, or waking and then sleeping, or escaping into various things, then those are the unawakened. They asked Lord Buddha, how many kinds of beings are there in the world? And he said, generally 2. Those who are awake to their Buddha nature and those who are not. So some person then said, well, what about those who are trying to awaken? Isn't that a third category? And Lord Buddha said, no, they're already awakened. They just don't know it yet. So it's a nice way of explaining this aspiration inside of us. There is a chart tomorrow I'll probably get to called The Reason for Lack of Spiritual Success. There are causes for lack of spiritual success, 5 of them. So they're good to study for the devotees or for the aspirants who are trying to make progress in this life, in this day, this year, and they want to see some definite progress. Now, seeing definite progress, as I said before our break, isn't watching ignorance disappear, because you cannot see it disappear because it doesn't exist. You can't make something that doesn't exist go away. That's the tact they take. Same with your true nature. You can't ever lose your true nature. You can only sublate it or cover it or condition it or superimpose over it so that you can't see it anymore. That's your doing. God has nothing to do with it. Devil has nothing to do with it. It's all you're doing. In the same way, they take that same tact against this disappearance of ignorance. To give you a story that Holy Mother used, she said if you get on the train in Calcutta and you're going towards Benares, you fall asleep on the way, and all that countryside goes by, and you never saw it. See, but you wake up in Benares. She says that's what the spiritual journey's like. You get on the path, and then you don't see ignorance go away, all that landscape and everything that goes by, because you're as it were asleep to it. And then you just wake up and you're enlightened. And when you wake up and you're enlightened, you can't remember what it felt like to be ignorant, because you never were really, ignorance was never really real. It really sounds very much like resist not evil, doesn't it? So it's a good way to unwrap Christ's sayings. They say that Vedanta is a superlative way of making a Buddhist a better Buddhist, a Christian a better Christian, a Jew a better Jew, and a Hindu a better Hindu, because it's specifically non-denominational, it's universal in its scope, and it's accepting of all religions. And it has that unique facet of not having just one prophet and one book, but hundreds of each. Out of India has spilled so many illumined souls. You can't even shake a stick at them, as my grandmother used to say. And also so many great scriptures, not just one book, but tens and dozens and hundreds of great scriptures, some of which we are studying right now. This is only one of 108 Upanishads that we're looking into. And as we look into it, we're looking into kalas, varnas, matrikas, bhuvanas, padas, and mantras, aren't we? I mean, it's all contained in just even a sentence. The whole thing can condense down to just a sentence. One sentence can awaken you. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Holy Mother used to say about Sri Ramakrishna, he said so many things in his life and they were all true, but if you just take one of them and meditate on them, that will be enough for you. So any profound statement from the Sadakya realm, if you ponder it, it will be enough for you. Some people are, read a sloka of the Gita a day, or they take a scripture and just know that day is their saying for the day. That's how they kind of keep vigil on the inner wisdom within them, so they don't lose track of it. They try and recall it, to remember it. So remembrance is really half the battle. To remember our true nature, of course, would be the specific way of expressing that. But even if we don't even believe in the true nature, as the father of yoga said, and Buddha too, you don't have to believe in God to practice yoga. Just practice it, and then you will find out what God is for you. It will come up naturally for you. God could be wisdom, God could be worship, God could be a formless, unknown verity. You could be an atheist and still realize God. This Swami Vivekananda said he met many people in the West when he came here who were atheists, who were much better people than those who professed to be religious. See? So God is formless. So if you have this penchant for form, and you begin to sort of gravitate just around one particular form, when all of these forms express reality, or one particular scripture, when all these scriptures have something to tell, then I'm sorry, my friend, you've gotten very narrow. And you must expand that, expand the mind to get a knowledge base, a wider knowledge base. That's a universal undertaking. So when we go into Upanishad, it means really pretty much the wisdom that comes from the teacher as a transmission that untangles the knot of ignorance. So therefore, when it says, when ignorance is dispelled, there is neither day nor night, neither being nor non-being. There is only that auspicious one who is imperishable and who is worthy of being worshipped even by the Creator. So they're making a nice distinction there between the Creator God, Lord Brahma, and Brahman. When you come into Vedanta or Sanskrit, you have to understand that Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the preserver, and Shiva is the destroyer. Really, erase, right? Basically what we want to say is Brahma is the projector, Vishnu is the sustainer, and Shiva is the dissolver. So everything gets projected, sustained, and withdrawn. It never gets created, preserved, and destroyed. That's an illusion. So that's like one of the first levels of our ignorance. The lowest of all hells is fear of death. There's no lower hell than fearing death, because you have placed Maya on top of Maya. You have piled gloom on top of gloom. Because that soul is ever pure and ever perfect and birthless and deathless, ajati, it's without birth, so it can never die. And so you have decided that it dies? Who are you to say that it dies when all the seers are saying it's eternally living? See? But you somehow, as an individual or as a family or as a town or as a city or as a nation or as a culture, have decided that God is born and dies like you do. See? That reality somehow has a beginning or an end, like everything else here does. See? Haven't looked very deeply into it. So therefore you have these beautiful Namrichur Nashanka Name Jati Beda Pita Naiva Me Naiva Mata Janmaha Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham. And don't forget the Om will put the finalizing statement on everything. If that doesn't convince you that everything's birthless and deathless, nothing will. So nam mrityur na shanka means nam mrityur, no death have I. Name jati beda, I have no caste, I have no species. Pita naiva me not naiva, I have no father, pita. Mata majanma, I have no mother and no birth. If I had no mother and no birth, then how could I ever die? This is Adhyatma, the path of those who know that everything is birthless and deathless, and it applies not only to you, your soul, it also applies to nature. Have you ever seen nature get born and die? A tree dies, another one takes its place. A leaf falls, another one takes its place. A river dries up, another one takes its place. Isn't everything eternal? So let's make a grand conclusion here that there are no middles, beginnings, and ends to anything. It just appears that there are. And that appearance is what's stultifying the mind. For ages, time out of mind, through cycles, people are raised amongst those appearances and nobody clarifies for them what they're seeing. It could be so brash as to say, it's illusory, like the Buddhist schools. See? It's an illusion. Give it up. See? Or you could be kinder and you could say, it's a manifestation of Brahman. It's an overflow of the bliss of Brahman, as one Rishi said in the Upanishads. That's one of my favorites, you see. Teachers talking on and on about Brahman, Brahman this, Brahman that, and the student finally says, what about the world? Well, you always talk about Brahman, why don't you talk about the world? And the seer goes, oh, that. That's just an overflow of the bliss of Brahman. Don't you know? So, if we approach the subject of ignorance, which we're about to do through this sloka in chapter 4, then we probably should first acknowledge that ignorance is an illusion, basically. So is death, so is evil, so is suffering, all illusory. We're feeling them in body-mind mechanisms that are tied to nerves, that are tied to senses, and that's our predicament. In other words, you could put it this way, there's a lot of unnecessary suffering out there. And then there's some necessary suffering. That is, if you take on a body, you're going to have to be subject to birth, which, by the way, is very painful. We all celebrate the baby coming into life, but he's not having any fun. Not in the womb for 8 months, or not when he's helpless for the first few years. Birth, growth, that's painful. Knitting of bones, growing, see, trying to grow out of some ignorance that your society tells you is in your head, is real. They're thinking it's actual. Birth, growth, disease, which comes to everyone, young and old alike. Decay, old age, and death. Those are the 6 transformations. Buddhism calls it sadurmi, 6 billows. They include hunger and thirst in there, things like that. These things that cannot be quenched. They cause suffering, especially if they're not satisfied. So let's put it this way. You can satisfy your hunger and thirst in a nominal way and not suffer too much. If you can. If you can't satisfy your hunger and thirst, then it's going to be great suffering for you. But this thirst for life, forever quench. Because it drags from birth to death and death to birth to soul. If you thirst for life, which is the addiction to prana, life force, as we've been talking about lately, then it drags from birth to death and death to birth to soul. And that soul doesn't know what's happening to it. It thinks its death is real, so it goes to a supposedly real death, and then it finds itself back in a form again, and it suffered birth, and it doesn't know where it came from. And so, with all the curtain of nescience so thickly dropped, then it doesn't remember lifetime to lifetime. But to speak of that, it doesn't remember its bardo of infanthood, its bardo of youth, its bardo of old age. It forgets everything. It doesn't remember what it ate last week on a certain day at a certain time. Once food goes down the throat, one can't even remember what it tastes like. So everything is passing, and also passing strange, as they say. See, So in this sweep of mutable experiences, of phenomena, changing phenomena that's going on all the time, the soul gets lost, gets stultified, and somewhere sets its foot on a path towards higher wisdom. Asato ma sadgamoya. Tamaso ma jyotirgamoya. Mrityor, we just had that word. What's that?
Death.
Death. Mrityor ma amritam gamaya. From mrityor to amrita, immortality. So asato, non-existence, to sato. Asato ma sadgamaya. It's one of the most famous slokas, and right here. Neither being nor non-being. Asat or sat. See, that great being is neither being nor non-being. It's beyond the duality. So we're going to have to develop a single eye to see that. We're going to have to go to some very specific and some very deep, subtle places in ourselves to find that non-dual Brahman. That's why Advaita Vedanta, non-duality, is becoming, I wouldn't say popular yet, but people are beginning to get attracted to it. And in fact, I would venture to say that Buddhism really is the Vedanta of the day right now. Vedanta has always been the underground river, you see, always nourishing everything on the surface. Until Swamiji jumped the ocean, like Hanuman, in 1893, nobody knew Hinduism, the deepest Hinduism, not just the cultural, polytheistic, interpreted Hinduism, but the Advaita Vedanta, the Upanishads, the great scriptures of I and my Father are one. Not just a cryptic statement somewhere lost in the Bible, but a whole explanation, a huge, expansive set of scriptures that focus directly on Brahman. On Brahman, on what Brahman is, on what Brahman consists of, on Brahman and its connection to the Atman, on Brahman and Atman and its connection to the Jivatman, that is the apparently individualized self and its relationship to the Supreme Self. That's all it talked about. It didn't talk about who owned what tent peg and what generation of some family walking around a desert somewhere. See, who cares about that? See, you want to know my relationship to God, don't you? What is God? Who am I? Isn't it the great question? Greatest of all questions. What, when, where, and why? Give them up. See? Why means cause and effect. Where means space. When means time. What good are those going to do you? Get over them. But ask finally the question, who am I? And how is this I related to the Supreme I? See? How is the Atman, the Jivatman, the Atman, and how is the Atman Brahman? Then one destroys the tendency towards karmas and towards cause and effect, and curtain of nescience rises, thins, and then the disappearance of ignorance happens, and a person is posited in an ever-awake state. He's got the insomnia of yoga. I'm a yogic insomniac. So it sort of sounds like a maniac, you know. They're kind of mad with that. Let's look at these two charts really quickly. No way we're going to get through all of them, but the disappearance of ignorance I've put up side by side with the curtain of nescience. Now, the curtain of nescience is a very interesting and unique to SRV, I must say, because nobody much is talking about it anymore. I got very interested in it with a few cryptic mentions of it in the Tantras and in the Vedanta, and also Buddhism. You hear it called the cloud of unknowing. So I'm thinking, cloud of unknowing, curtain of nescience must be kind of the same thing, you see. And it's all around this subtle ignorance in our minds, this, which ultimately is non-existent, but which makes its appearance in our mind when we allow our mind's eye to become clouded, or we become distracted, or one eye turns to two eyes, or the doubt about our true nature comes to us. See, comes to us, and then finally we're not born with parents who teach us this. I mean, I didn't have parents who taught me this. I had to find a couple teachers who knew it. I had moral parents. That was a start, but it wouldn't have ever been enough. Morality gets you to heaven, but Dharma gets you to realization. For instance, thou shalt not kill. Fine, good moral law. But what about thou cannot kill? Because nothing's born. See? What about that teaching? Non-violence, ahimsa. See? If nothing's born, if everything is unborn, if everything's unoriginated, and there was really ultimately no origination to anything, then there's no way you can kill anyone. You're just killing a body, and it's forming another body later. And then you've got the karma for killing that body on your hands. And that could come to you later too. Or it could come right away. Vivekananda said, those who are higher spiritual attainment, their karma comes back at them right away. And those who are not very spiritually attained, their karma takes a long time to come back. So this explains that problem some of us are having who are just and noble. And we're looking at people committing heinous crimes in government, against nature, against other cultures. And we're saying, why isn't God punishing those people, right? Well, first of all, let's leave God out of it, as I said, because God has nothing to do with it. But why aren't the laws of karma operating? Like attracts like, recompense, you see, eye for an eye and so forth. That's because karma is operating, but it's operating in cycles that are longer than you can see. And some people are very good at escaping their karma.
For a lifetime.
Yes, even for that. And basically they're also, you could say, they're very good at escaping their true self, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
That's called Swarupanyata Bhava. 7 syllables. Trying to get beyond that. Swarupanyata Bhava means very excellent at running away from your true nature, your Swarupa, your essence. So there are people who make a profession out of not seeing themselves, of hiding away. In fact, many animals are like that. You see them just disappear underground and never come out. A worm is like that. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that. Men are mere worms. He's talking about those who are running away from their true self, or aren't noble enough to stand up. And why aren't they noble enough to stand up? Because they have a lot of karma they're going to have to face off first. They're going to have to suffer that. But if they can suffer that karma in the light of realization, like the light of a guru, the light of a sangha, the light of a great sampradaya, a great system, then it will not be so painful. They can do it in 6 months, Vivekananda said. You can become a yogi in 6 months if you really want to. So, if we talk about a curtain of nescience which is so subtle that we only feel its effects, but we don't know where its cause is. That's what we're talking about when we talk about something like the curtain of nescience. Just look at this. You see this kind of darkness in our deep sleep state. And it comes forward and manifests itself in the collective consciousness as various superstitions we're holding, misbeliefs. For instance, like we're so damn certain that matter is all that exists. And we will not acknowledge anything about the spirit. And when we do, we get together in churches and the spirit becomes a form for us. And that form becomes our only way. So now Christ is the only way, Krishna is the only way. It doesn't matter what religion, they're all guilty of fundamentalism. Fortunately, all religions also have a non-dual element in them. That is a universal aspect. There's universal Christianity, there's universal Hindu paths, there's universal Islamic paths like Sufism. So basically, looking around and scouring all of that, we find a good path that fits our temperament and our samskaras from past lifetimes, and we feel like we've found a fit. And at that time, the curtain of nescience is already thinning. See, very thick when we're narrow. and starting to thin when we're starting to seek truth. Thickens up again when we brood. Brood on what? Fear, doubt, and ignorance. Those are the... So let's take that quote by Lord Shiva. He says, here, he says, Lord Shiva, sort of looking in on the whole thing. The luminaries have determined that the curtain of nescience consists of fear, doubt, and ignorance, and is maintained and thickened due to the mind's brooding on the effects of these three primal causes. So now if we find that fear, ignorance, and doubt are really the consistency of the curtain of nescience in us, then we can start to go after them. Now, as I was saying, I had a good conversation with a couple students yesterday, looking back on the Seattle retreat where I first presented this last weekend. They were saying, it's interesting that when you say fear and doubt, that why isn't it, like fear of my neighbor, or fear of my wife, or fear of a dog, fear of drowning. Those are all fears that people encounter all the time. Fear of attending a group, like coming to satsang. You see, there's all these little fears we have. Sometimes they're stronger in us, sometimes they're weaker. But really, what we look at when we look at the curtain of nescience type of fear is the great causes for these. These bullet points here, for instance, death, fear of formlessness. Was that old book they used to read, Fear of Flying? I think that meant fear of getting free. Essentially, it wasn't flying in the air. But there's a good example. I don't want to get in airplanes. I told some of my students recently, come to the retreat, fly from the East Coast. I said, I don't like to get on airplanes. That's fear of flying. But, maybe at the foundation of that is fear of something I might say to them will cause them to wake up. And that's responsibility. And they don't want that. See? I get that in prisons all the time. I go to prison and teach all the time, these teachings to inmates. And one inmate said to me once, Babaji, when I first heard you speak, I was so mad at you, because that's the first time I ever heard the truth. And I realized when I heard that I had to wake up. And it made me really pissed off at you. Sorry for the language, live streaming audience. Take it or leave it. So this fear of death would be the lowest of all hells, according to the father of yoga. He calls it abhinivesha, fear of death. Or he calls it sometimes clinging to life. You could put it either way. See people who are 80 or 90 and suffering the body, but they don't want to die. They don't want to let go of this decrepit old form, this cage of bones and flesh, as the seers call it. Even though, why don't they? Because they don't know yet that the mind produces bodies like trees produce leaves. Like mind produces bodies like children taking off clothes and putting on new ones when they grow out of the old ones. This is a fact in yoga in India that this happens. Is that you just go from life to life. Sri Krishna puts it very nicely in the Bhagavad Gita when Arjuna asks him about it, and Krishna says, well, you ought to know this. If you can't know the Supreme Brahman yet, if you can't admit that there is a supreme reality, then you should know this, that everything that's born dies, and everything that dies gets born again. And where is the grief in this? So that's how he explains it to Arjuna. There are two ways to look at it. Either everything is just eternal Brahman and I have nothing to fear, or I have to go at it through a series of lifetimes until I realize that. And as I go through it through these series of lifetimes, I should know that I'm the one that's taking on these bodies. I'm the one that's producing these bodies. And nature gives me the elements to do it. Earth, air, fire, water, and ether. Flesh, blood, bones, marrow, pus excreta. Just do a charnel pit meditation on yourself someday. The Buddhist wants you to do the charnel pit meditation. See? Or Holy Mother said, what's all the fuss about this physical body? It's just a couple pounds of ashes in the end. So how detached they are from their form. 32 years for Shankara, Rishi, the great Advaitin, who brought back the Advaita Vedanta to the world in 700 AD after the decline of that Buddhist phase at the time. Swami Vivekananda, 39 years, you see. When I think of him, I can't help but sing about him. Narendra Shashave, Narendra Yavane, Narendra Palane, Narendra Shikshane, Narendra Yarpane, Narendra Palane, Vivekananda te Prabhate Pranjalihi, Vivekananda te Prabhate Pranjalihi. And don't forget the Om. So, Swami Vivekananda, you're the same, whether you're a young boy, a baby, or a seer of truth. You remain the same through all changes. So we look back on this harbinger of Vedanta in the West, really the guru of gurus. See, America doesn't have its saint and seer yet, its own. It has to borrow from the East. Christ was an Easterner, by the way. He's not a Westerner. He didn't have blonde hair and blue eyes. Dusky skinned, olive eyes, whatever. But Vivekananda is really our first American seer and sage. He came and pretty much gave himself to us and brought all the swamis that came after him. And just like Dalai Lama and the Buddhists, Tibetan Buddhists now, they're here, they're among us, you see. And we can now learn from them. Learn what is most worthy of knowing. We've learned everything else. We know more than they do about the world. Right? About mechanical science and those kinds of things. Vivekananda was amazed when he saw us. He came here. He wrote back to his brothers and said, you're all frogs in the well. You should come to America, see where it's really happening. He really loved us. But when he saw us spiritually, he said, oh, I see, you're just babies. Spiritually, you're still operating under superstition. You're infantile. Don't you know that God, man is just God walking around on two legs? There's no other God in the universe. Have you seen a God up there on a cloud with a beard? Or a four-armed somebody walking at you down the street? See? 10-armed goddess coming to you. Hi, shake my hands. See? Have you seen one of those? No. Man is it. Mankind, woman, child, it's all the manifested Brahman. Mankind is it. And if you go up in space, you probably won't find anything else but the footprint of a man in some of that lava, if we ever made it to another planet in the past. Forget UFOs. The whole universe is a manifestation of your own mind. Man's mind is the blueprint for everything. Everything came out of his mind. God's mind, to be more specific, but it happens at, as we said, cosmic, then collective, then individual levels. It trickles down in a three-world, three-division type of manifestation. And they're very good at explaining it, as you can see. So, if you want to go to the root of fear, then probably the great fear of death, which is really saying to yourself, I do not exist, or someday I will not exist. If you existed once, why aren't you going to exist at all times? Does it make sense to think that you could all of a sudden be aware and then be non-aware? The body certainly can be born and die, but there is but one, the free, the knower, self. without a name, without a form or stain. In him is Maya, dreaming all this dream. As witness, he appears as nature and soul. He appears as nature and soul. He's not nature, soul, but he appears as that. See? And along with it, all the problems that come with appearance. All these things that if we don't deal with, it becomes a thick curtain in us, and we never know the truth. From cradle to the grave, we're in ignorance, as my teacher used to say. So we must make fear afraid of itself. We must put death in its own grave. Now, I thought once my teacher, and all these sayings are coming back, you see. He used to say that. Make fear afraid of itself, put death in its own grave. So that primal fear, mrityur, fear of death, must be there at the very root of things. See, people come and go in and out of the body based upon this fear. And when they, somewhere inside of themselves, they look out from the inner peace that they're in when they're dead, when they're outside the body or they've dropped the body, they look outside on the inner, from a space of inner peace, then they can see all of the kingdoms of heaven outside of them. So they can see the lokas, and then they can pick their parents, and they can pick their gender, and they can pick the country that they're in. And this is called conscious birth, taking a conscious birth, and you will die a conscious death. Death and birth then being illusory, being a transitional, right? I mean, basically, if you didn't even talk about life and death, and you just went to a teacher and learned the kalas, then you would know about the power of manifestation, wouldn't you? How things go from an unmanifested to a manifested state, and it would be quite easy for you to simply apply that to your own appearance of your own body and its disappearance. Sort of a matter of little moment, the appearance of the body and its disappearance. More important to use it now as it's living, see. Use it to realize the truth. That's why it's here. If you can realize the truth here, you can realize it anywhere. To quote another song and change its lyrics. Because here in the body is where the curtain of Natchez is the thickest. So what about fear of formlessness? People, Swarupa were running away from their true self, right? But then there's another opposite to that, it's called Swarupa Pratista. Pratista means steady in my essence. Swarupa, my essence, I'm steady in it. From birth to death and death to birth goes the soul. Fine for the body, and fine for the mind mechanism, body-mind mechanism, but myself, I remain constant and the same. Ever free, never bound. As all the changes go by. Or if I read the book of nature, see, I stay the same. Fear of formlessness, then, something we need to get over. How? By meditating outside the body. As Vivekananda told us when he was here, just shut your eyes, turn off the senses, shut down the senses, shut down all the 9 gates of the body if you can, and then just say, I'm dying. I have nothing, I'm a voice without a form. I have no ego, I have no body. I'm dead now, but something in me is still living. See? I can shut off everything that's in the senses, right? Isn't that what they just told us? His form does not stand within the range of the senses. First sentence of Sloka 20 that we took this morning. So if that's the case, then I should believe the seers in that regard because they know reality and I don't. And I should probably just follow them. And I should just cut time down, cut space away, turn off the senses and pass. I should practice death. And when I know that death is just a transitional point that I can get beyond, then I should practice formlessness. And then you'll find these people sitting for 6 or 8 hours a day in perfect formlessness. Nothing but a hum going on in the background. For hours they're hearing the Om, however they would say it or explain it. And so they practice formlessness. Pretty soon they find themselves practicing samadhi. As Shankara said in the Vivekachudamani, yeah, have samadhi, that's your true nature. And if Ramakrishna taught us anything, it was that we are samadhi. Let's say that like that. Aham nirvikalpa nirakara rupa vibhutvacha sarvatra sarvendriyanam chirananda rupaha shivoham shivoham Om. So, aham nirvikalpa. He starts off the 6th verse of the 6 stanzas on nirvana by saying, I am aham nirvikalpa, the supreme samadhi. There's no doubt in Shankara's mind who he is. Let's put it that way. And there's no doubt in Vedanta's great mind what you are either. Otherwise, aham brahmasmi, I am Atma Brahma, tatvamasi, pragyanam Brahma. The 4 great statements. The 4 great statements. I mean, if you got to the level of varnas, padas, and mantras, those would be the supreme statements that you would meditate on. I am Brahman, this self is consciousness. I am supreme intelligence, and that thou art. That Brahman thou art. There's no difference between you and that. I and my Father are one. And Christ had that experience after sitting in samadhi in the wilderness for days. And Buddha had it after sitting under the bo tree for 49 days. And Muhammad went to the mountain and had it. Moses went to the wilderness and had it. That's what great religions are founded on. Realization. What else? And that is, of course, realization with a capital R, as Vivekananda was later to say. We've had enough of this religion with a small r, this conventional religion, this superstition, these fundamental assumptions, these preposterous and untenable assumptions. That man is a sinner, man is divine, that there's an eternal damnation, there's an eternal life. So we concentrate on the great statements, we realize what's in the great statements by unwrapping them inside of our own mind. That's piercing the atom of intelligence, splitting the atom of intelligence. And a great implosion takes place. It's called realization, enlightenment. So a little bit about formlessness and its import. We should start practicing it. Start thinking of ourselves as a formless entity, beyond the range of the senses. Can't be sense-bound anymore. And especially not when you know you have 5 senses and dreams, so you must have another level to your consciousness. You're flying in a dream, you're tasting in a dream. You're smelling in a dream. Hopefully not too badly. And you're seeing and touching and everything else in a dream. You have 5 elements in a dream. You have land that you created, you have water that flows, you have air that you fly in. It's all your own doing. It's called sankalpa, mental projection. It's the art of mental projection. The mind is very good at it. It's adept at it. What it's not very adept at is going formless. Once it's projected the worlds, it tends to get stuck there. I mean, imagine you're a wizard and you had a magic wand and you created a beautiful world. Zap, pazat, you see. And then you're so amazed you drop your wand and you got into it. And you got lost in it. You left your wand outside. That's the predicament of a man caught in Mayic Sankalpa, living in his own created worlds as if they were real, when they're nothing but cloud castles in the sky, and the real knowledge that will dispel the ignorance of that dream and will destroy the curtain of nescience has been left outside somewhere. He's lost it. He himself projected it, he himself can withdraw it, is the idea. God has nothing to do with that whatsoever. That's all superstition, to think that God creates and destroys. Not the God of my tradition, sorry. God of my tradition, to quote Vivekananda, is acreate. Is never caught in wise conception or any kind of sankalpic, vikalpic process. It's pure, perfect, stainless, formless, nameless, timeless, deathless, and everything that we discussed as being inherent characteristics to the Atman. That's my God. Thank you very much. And I have good teachers by the hundreds that can confirm this, not only by scripture and by wisdom, but by their own experience. For time out of mind. Aren't I fortunate? See? Isn't the Vedantist fortunate? So this is what we dwell in, and then from that standpoint we can look at some of these problems, these fears, these doubts, and this root ignorance from a standpoint of detached witness consciousness, so we can look at them and inspect them. Ramakrishna said, never study Maya, it'll draw you in, which in my opinion is what happened to science. You should always look at Maya from a distance, like a fog bank, and watch it just dissolve. Watch the sun dissolve it. Because you're in it, you imagine spooks and ghosts and all sorts of things. Your Saturn's rings look like one thing in the 1970s, and the next time you send a satellite up, it looks like another thing. You have to rewrite the book. Because Maya is always changing. One scientist looks at some particle in an electron microscope and draws one conclusion. Another scientist looks at the same particle in the electron microscope and draws a completely different conclusion. Why? Because their minds are in different moods at the time. Didn't the mind create the universe then? Isn't the mind different each day? Sometimes it's slothful, sometimes it's restless, sometimes it's very balanced, thank you very much. And so whatever the mind is like, it's coloring that which it produced, you see. It colors the worlds. You must have noticed how the world's your oyster one day and a pit of hell another day. And it's all due to the mind. When you're here in Vedanta, Buddhism, Shaivism, Vaishnavism, Tantra, Yoga, you're in the mind-only schools. They're called the mind-only schools, Buddhism. They know the mind is at the hub of everything. And again, remember, cosmic mind, collective mind, individual mind, they're all three levels of one mind. But like sparks off a fire, like butter and milk, like oil and sesame seed, they're all one, see, one hidden presence at the foundation of all those movements. So practice formlessness. Now, suffering, fear of suffering. When I said it was one of those things that's ultimately unreal, we tend to make it more real by brooding on it. Now, that's a teaching I'd kind of like to get to before we end, and we only have 15 minutes. So with this in mind, let's jump over to the fact that Lord Shiva has just said that this curtain of nescience throughout, with its three main elements of ignorance, doubt, and fear, is thickened by brooding. So the practice you have right now is to give up brooding. It's just to stop it. Cut it out. So you're going to have to watch the mind, which is a good practice anyway. You started off watching the breath, evened out the breath, and that helped you. Now get to the real source of the suffering, the human mind. As Ramakrishna said, it's the gateway to heaven, it's also the doorway to hell. So this mind can take you either direction, you might have noticed. So inspect the mind, watch it for every sign of brooding, and cut that out as soon as it happens. It's unreal. What's throwing up is unreal. It's not really real. And the fact that you're allowing it to come up and gain a hold, maybe for a minute, maybe for a day, and then a year, then a lifetime, you see how it goes. Just like some growth that happened somewhere here, you see. And it just became a kind of cancerous thing, you see. A permanent fixture of the curtain of nescience, so that it's so crystallized that very difficult for anyone to get inside of there. You have to go to an avatar and say, "Can you help me with this?" See, where's that pit of karma that everything gets thrown into? Can I throw this into it too? So, examine the mind for any tendency towards brooding. You might say a lot of the schools in the West, the conventional schools of positive mind, you have to accentuate the positive, right? And then the negative you have to do the opposite with that. So that's a practice. But you don't just do it on a conventional sense. So you accentuate the positive means drinking, chasing women, having fun. That's what they mean. But, or even on the level of a Western psychology, accentuate the positive means I want to become all good and perfect and pleasurable and happy. A good world is a contradiction in terms, folks. Who said that? Minus the folks. Swami Vivekananda said it. A good world is a contradiction in terms. It's like saying hot ice. There's no such thing as a good world. Everything is an admixture. If the mind created the worlds, then what's in the mind is duality, right? It would have never ventured to create in the first place if it had have been thine eye single. It would have never ventured to create in the first place. Since it ventured to create, it came forth with everything which is in the mind, which has good, bad, and mixed. Virtue and vice, pleasure and pain, life and death, happiness and sorrow, and on with a whole host of dualities. All the way up to form and formlessness, bondage and liberation. People brood on those too. Why am I bound? Why am I a form all the time? See? I mean, you could say fear of form, fear of being formless, but really the fear really stems from I am a form, doesn't it? Because a form's going to die. If I could say I'm formlessness, then I'd say formlessness is never born, it dies. But a form gets born and it dies. So I'm going to put myself in a great quandary and predicament when I took on form. When I came down from that, through that Vishnu Granti, or through that Rudra Granti and came down into form, then I had a problem right there. And the further down I came, the greater came the problem. The thicker came the curtain of nescience, until I was pondering. And so maybe I wasn't even aware of the roots of fear, ignorance, and suffering, and doubt, but I was actually all caught up in their effects. As he says here, right? Thicken due to the mind's brooding on the effects of these primal causes, not on brooding on the causes themselves. So you have to trace yourself back to those causes, find them and eradicate them in your mind, and be free. That's a good practice. You don't have to believe in God to do it. You don't have to be a part of a religion to do it. It's yoga. It's just claiming your right to be one with who you are. I and my Father are one. All you need to do is claim it, and then find out what is in the way of that prime relationship, you see, that homogeneous nature of things, the indivisibility of all things. So brooding on this is a great teaching. You can see in this chart, which we didn't get to in Seattle, that here's the waking state, here's the soul in a kind of foggy condition. He's going toward the waking state and dreaming up a world with relationships with people, trees and nature and so forth. Then across the tier is dreaming, cloud castles in the sky here, you see, with various beings presiding over them. He also goes into a deep sleep state which heads more toward the life, toward the light, toward Sri Devi herself. Sri Devi is the goddess, the primal goddess. She's that one whom, if one beholds, then the curtain of nescience has no chance there. It has no way of existing in her. She will dispel the curtain of nescience. There are beautiful songs written about her, as we said, and great statements about her. I remember one says, in deepest, darkest, dense privacy, the great saints and yogis meditate so that they can see her scintillating light all the better. So if you want to see the light of the goddess, they go into caves, total sense deprivation, put themselves in a situation that is all black, all dark, so that when she does make her appearance out of the heart, that her brilliance will be twice as stupendous, as if they were to see her sitting in a meditation in a room like this or something. See? They want that contrast to be that much pronounced. So in that way, Sri Devi stands in the light, you see, behind the curtain of nescience, just ushering you through. See? Another song of India states, Divine Mother, I approached her and asked her to go down into the worlds of becoming. Now, there's the world of being as your true nature, and then becoming is all of this. So I asked her to go down into the worlds of becoming, and she said, yes, go down there, by all means, and sport. But don't forget where you came from. And she winked at me. See? It means, don't forget that you belong to me. See? That you will come to me. Yeah. And that all of my worlds that you're going to are all projections of the great mind. Never forget that. So this curtain of nescience sort of inundates our waking, dreaming, and deep sleep state. That's where ignorance, fear, and doubt seep into the cracks of our thinking consciousness and our sleeping consciousness and our dreaming consciousness and our deep sleep consciousness. In deep sleep, we have the best chance of seeing the light and hearing Om, hearing the sound. If you wake up sometimes before your consciousness completely comes back to the senses, you'll hear that Om going away, that hum, that sound, if you're very sensitive. And when just before you fall asleep, you'll also hear yourself dissolve into that Om. And that sound comes and overtakes you and just dissolves you, like a hailstone in an ocean. Or like Sri Ramakrishna said, a sugar cube placed in hot tea. See? It just breaks up slowly until there's nothing but one homogeneous mass of sweet liquid. See? So deep sleep rather simulates samadhi. It's very close to samadhi. So you should try and bring some light into that deep sleep state. Try and think about penetrating the curtain of nescience or thinning the curtain of nescience consciously when you go into deep sleep. That's going to be aided by another most important practice, meditation. That is probably the prime yoga of all. That is the last thing that matures in most yogas is meditation. That's why I chanted this morning, first thing, Te Dhyan Yoga Nugata Pasyan, Devatma Shaktim Svagunayar Nagudam. Te Dhyan Yoga, through the yoga of meditation, Dhyan. The ancient seers perceived the Devatma Shakti. Deva, Devi, the great being, the Shakti, her energy, her consciousness, which had been veiled to them before because of the limitations of their own intellect. But when they ran these new nadis into the mind, they opened up these trails, these pathways inside, all of a sudden she became more accessible to them. Until you have a being like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who's seeing her everywhere. And he's become her. So we covered those 3 or 4 slokas today. Sloka 18, where we revisited the Sadakya, the 6 ways of knowledge, of Brahmagyan. We looked at Sloka 19, where we saw that nobody can grasp him, and whose name is great glory. We looked at the 6 powers of the Lord. Then we went to 20, and we saw the form is beyond the senses. So we started looking at this formlessness and its teachings. And also through the faculty of intuition, that being was seated in our very hearts. And then we looked at all the things that had to do with the heart chakra here, and also the inherent characteristics of the Atman who dwells in that citadel. So many beautiful, widespread, fine teachings, all very connected. No matter what darshana of India you might pull them from, yoga, tantra, Vedanta, Buddhism, they all connect up perfectly well to that universal mind who is interested in non-dual truth, and also all the wisdom that supports it throughout all the 3 worlds and the 7 lokas. So with that said, well, we have 5 more minutes, but we covered those slokas. So tomorrow we will cover sloka 21, 22, and that will complete chapter 4. So tomorrow we'll look at Shiva. That is, this next sloka says, "Some being afraid," that's fear of course, "approach thee thinking that thou art unborn, O Shiva. So deign to protect me by that benevolent face of thine." So Upanishad brings in a deity. The Upanishads are very beautiful that way, as they're really non-dual. They're the 3 great non-dual scriptures of India: Brahma, Sutras, Bhagavad Gita, and Upanishads. But they have within them lots of dualistic and qualified non-dualistic statements. The 3 levels of philosophy are all in there, because most people can't immediately comprehend the specifically non-dual, and the specifically non-dual doesn't have a lot of description to it. It has to be something like, "that thou art." Okay, you've learned Advaita, go away. See? Now go meditate on those 3 words, and you're left like, "Well, that thou art, what's that mean?" See? What am I? What's that? What's art have to do with it? So then the scriptures have Advaita, Vishishtadvaita, and Dvaita all in them. So this statement where they bring in Lord Shiva, they call him Rudra, the terrible. "Please protect me, and we know thou art unborn, and we're afraid to approach you. Please protect me." And later on says, "Please do not destroy our heroes." And we'll get into the significance of some of those statements with a couple charts I have to show you tomorrow. So thank you here for your kind attentions. Thank the live streaming audience for joining us. Please join us tomorrow at the same time, and next weekend, Saturday and Sunday at this time, and the following weekend in San Francisco, Saturday and Sunday at this time. So let's end here with a chant in the final 3 minutes. Om Sato, Om Sato Ma Sadgamaya, Tamaso Ma Joytir Gamaya, Mrichur Ma Amritam Gamaya, Abira Abira Mayeti, Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukam, Tenamam Pahinicham, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother of the universe, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hare